All right, welcome to guest coach Norm's tutorial on the 5-1 serve and serve receive rotations. This will be a good visual for the players and the parents to kind of have a better understanding what we're learning here. 5-1 is traditionally the normal what you'll play in college. We were starting off with a 6-2, but just with some of the changes we're going to make, the 5-1 is going to be within our best interest. So I hope you guys get some information out of this, and here we go. So the 5-1 kind of represents that we're going to have five hitters and one setter on the court at any time. What that secondary number represents is when the setter, if they're especially if they're playing off the back row, when they go to the front, what do they represent? Do they become a hitter or are they a setter? So with the 5-1, since we're playing only one setter, when the setter rotates to the front, they are still a hitter. If we were running a 6-2, which means we're going to have six hitters, so whenever the setter would run to the front, they actually become a hitter because we're running a setter off the back. If we were running a 4-2, it's because we're running the setters off the front. With us, we're going to work on a 5-1. This will be really good for the girls because this is kind of the standard rotation that you play as players get older. Be honest, this will be the first time I've ever really ran it with 13-year-olds, but I do have a good skill set that we can actually pull this off, and it'll be in our best interest with the players. So that means that we'll have one setter and five hitters on the court, two outsides, two middles, and one offset right side, which is because when the setter goes to the front, they still represent a setter. Doesn't mean that the setter can't hit off the front. Actually gives them some leverage a little bit because when they're a back row player, they cannot jump in front of the 10-foot line to make contact with the ball over the other side. They can still attack now from the front, which will be a good option for us moving forward, and we're going to work on some plays on that. So I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a breakdown of the zones just so that everybody's familiar with it, especially this will help out the parents. The court's kind of broken down to, in basics, six zones. You have zone one, zone two, zone three, zone four, zone five, and zone six. So if you hear me talking about the players that serve to zone one or zone five, here you go. Those are the areas that we would want to serve at. Tendency at 13s, you'll notice that they serve a lot at the zone six. Um, and there is a comment later in the slides that I talk about the setter will be setting out of zone two. That is where their house will be for three of the rotations. In college, it actually gets broken down a little bit more, where let's say we're in zone six. You also have a 1, 2, 3, 4, which represents each corner. So you could say serve zone six, 2, which would be actually the zone six left hand bottom corner. But we're not going to get into that with these players, but just give you an idea of how this is set up. So as we start, this would be our starting rotation as far as positions. The DS could be also an outside hitter playing DS, but when the outside hitter moves to the back, they become a DS. There's a defensive specialist, so they have it. When we start, we'd have a middle in the back and then switch out with the libero. Libero position is supposed to be considered your best defensive player, and there's some rules with the libero where they cannot play jump higher in the net uh, anywhere on the court. Doesn't matter if they're in front or back of the 10-foot line. They cannot. You do a two-hand set in front of the 10-foot line, which is the line that's right behind the outside, middle, and right side. So you have a better understanding of that. Um, Noticing how the right side starts where the outside position is, and the outside is actually starting where the right position is. That's just kind of how the setup is, because the way you would look at it to know that you're in the right rotation is your counterpart would be either across or diagonally across. So if you look at the setter, look how the setter is directly across from the right side. The right side is considered the setter position when they get to the front, or they turn into a right side. Same with the outside hitter, it's directly across from the DS. So if you're middle back, your counterpart should be right in front of you to start. So with the libero, they represent the middle position. The middle is right in front of them. So now we're going to get into actually how we would actually stack and set up for this particular rotation. So for serve receive, there's a little bit of strategies to it. You want to make sure that you have areas covered. So the little arrows kind of represent seams. Seams are the responsibilities of what the player should be covering when the ball goes over. These are areas that you want they should be discussing. And at 13 is a little hard, but I want them to start getting to the ideas of having conversations. I got this, I got that, I got short, I got deep, and they really communicate on the court. So if you see the DS and the libero has a little bit deep, the DS has angles, the outside has a short in front of the libero. The middle is just covering anything that dribbles over the 10-foot line. Middles aren't really traditionally heavily involved in the serve receive, but sometimes you have a good passing middle you can adjust. I mean, I could push back the middle a little bit. The idea is that if you go back to how they start, the players just can't cross over. So let's take the middle traditionally in the front. The middle can't go past the person that's to the left of them, to the right of them, or the person that's behind them. As long as they're pushed and everything works out, we're fine. So if you look in this, the middle is actually in front of the libero, and they're not past the outside here or the right side, so they're fine. Same with the setter. The setter could not be in front of the outside hitter that's coming off the front row. That's why if you see the setter stacked behind them, it's just this is where you would get called out of rotation. You always try to tuck your setter in your serve receives just for the fact that you want them to have second ball. So if they serve receive first ball, then you got to go out of system, which means somebody else has to take the second ball. So you guys are aware we've been having our outside fronts or right sides take it. Traditionally, you would have the libero do it, but I just wanted to really the liberos to focus on defense first. Now, with the new player changes, I'm going to actually have my libero take the second ball, just as she was acting as a setter and phenomenal setter at that, and she's going to do a great job at being a libero. One of the better passes on the team, so this will be a benefit for us. So if you look, so with the serve, once the ball is served, I'm traditionally going to go 6. See how the shift goes. As soon as every player understands that they are not making a play on that ball, they need to get into their next role. So if you saw the shift how it was going, the setter went into the house, their house where they're going to set, which is in the 2. Outside, middle, and right side actually position themselves on the 10-foot line to become hitters. The libero's already kind of where they need to be. The DS needs to should shift over a little bit, but they're in the areas that they're supposed to be at the moment. I'm not going to worry about coverage with their teams just because there's not a lot of blocking. But as they get older, then there's a whole nother movement where they cover the hits. So after we watch the right side make the hit on this particular one, but the right side's in the outside position. After the ball goes back over the net, the shift between the outside and right side would happen, and it needs to happen fast, and they would end up becoming, playing in their correct positions. All 3 of them at this point should be at the net ready for defense. All right, so now we rotated. Outside actually was off the front row, moved to the back. So the DS became an outside when they moved up. The outside became a DS when they moved back. Notice now how the setter is now positioned in the middle back to start. Okay, so this is where they would start, but this isn't where they end up. Once everything goes into play, then they kind of go into their normal responsibilities, but they just can't cross over. So looking at this, the setter could not go past the DS and could not go past the libero to their left. And they could not go in front of the right side. As long as they didn't do that, we're not out of rotation. Same thing with outside, cannot go past the right side or behind the libero to start. Once the ball is in play, it doesn't matter where they go. But back row, just be aware if you started in the back row, there are rules about you playing front row where you cannot make contact with the ball above the net in front of the 10-foot line. So this is just one of the actions. That's why you can get away with a back row attack as long as the ball is hit and made contact, or the player is at least above in the air and started behind the 10-foot line and made contact before they land. So with this, okay, now we're in rotation 2 serve receive. Notice how the setter is pushed up, kind of hidden behind the right side, trying to avoid first touch. And is in a good position because they're right there where they need. So passing needs to go in this area for them. Right side will need to shift over to right side. Middle will need to shift over to the middle back. And then the outside is passer first, but once they know they're not in the play, they move up to the 10-foot line. Once that ball is being contacted by whoever is making first touch, I should have the hitters working their way to the 10-foot with the setter moving into the house so that they can be prepared to actually make the play. So as you can see, we're all set up. These are the seams, areas of coverage. As we watch the ball served, the hitter hits, and then notice how the DS goes to in their area and liberos are in their spot. Once the play happens, the setter would go back in the defense and the right back. The hitters would actually, once the ball plays, the hitters would actually move up to the net for defense. But as you watch, it's basically once you know you're not in the play, you make movement into your next responsibility. At the same time, paying attention to what play is going on, just in case, especially if the ball's hit hard, that ball might be dug up and sent right back. And so everybody has got to be ready. This is an option if we struggle in serve receive. We always have the option to push players back. We could move it. This is one I'm not really wanting to do, but if we got into the area, we'd have to. Pushing the right side back. Noticing the right side still doesn't pass the setter. Setter has to back up. Still not crossing over the middle or the outside hitter. And then the DS kind of pushes over a little bit. Gives us 4 on the back for serve receive. If we have somebody that's just kind of chewing us up a little bit, this is an option. Really want to work with these guys and learn to push back. Because sometimes you just got to make adjustments. Somebody's struggling to pass, or we just, this is just one tough server that we just got to cover all aspects. So you can't just keep doing, the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. So with this, we would change it up a little bit to see if we can get a better option of digging that ball up and getting past this particular server. Like I told the girls, basically 2 of the matches, it was 2 servers from each team that really kind of took all the points from us. All right, so here we go. So now we're in rotation 3. Setter moved over. Notice they're definitely a little ways from where they would normally position themselves, but this is how rotations work. Middle moved up to the front. Well, actually, libero moved up to the front. So now you need to replace them with the middle because the liberos are not allowed to play front row as traditionally. They can't jump above the net at all, so they can't become a hitter at all. They can never make contact with the ball above the net. So now we have the libero in the back. So in rotation through, we're going to have our libero serve most likely. So, but if we had them serve in rotation 6, this would be a middle serving until they lose the ball. Once they lose serve, the libero would come in to replace them. Once the libero serves in a specific spot, then they're done, and that's the only place that they're allowed to serve in. So in this case, it'd be rotation 3. All right, so now we're in rotation 3, serve receive. Notice how the setter is tucked behind the middle. The outside's playing a little bit off the 10-foot to make sure that they can take any dribbles. We do have the option of pushing the outside back. They just got to make sure they don't cross over the right side to the right of them and then be behind the libero. So with this, it gives us an option of 4 if we wanted to, but right now this is how we run it. Once the ball gets in play, setter would actually move over into the house, middle to middle, outside, outside, right side, right side. Need a nice high pass with this because there's a lot of area travel. Everybody's got to be aware of this. If it's a short pass, somebody's got to make the play. So as you see, the shift, set, setter is set to the middle on this particular one. After their set goes off and they hit, setter would go back defensively. Libero and DS are in the right spot. Right side and the outside hitters would actually come to the net and be in defensive stance. All right, so now we rotated into rotation 4. This is the rotation that would push the setter up to the front. Remember, the setter started in rotation 1 in the back in zone 1. Now they are pushed up into zone 4, and this was where you start thinking about the rotation numbers. We said we're running a 5-1, so this would tell you that the setter, once they go to the front, remains a setter. Doesn't mean they can't hit. It's a good option. That's why usually in a 5-1, especially as they get older, the setters are tall if they're going to play a 5-1 because they still need to be blockers and they still can become hitters to hit. But traditionally, they are the setter once they go to the front. With let's say we were running a 4-2, they would still be the setter every time they go to the front. But with the 6-2, when they go to the front, they would become the hitter because where that right side position is marked right now, they would be a setter would get put in there if they're not already the setter. So this kind of gives you an idea where we're at right now. And all right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're pushed back, and in this particular one, you can see that we have a four back row serve receive. DS is not crossing over the libero or going behind the libero, so we're fine. Same with the outside is not going behind the right side. As long as they stay in front of the right side, we're fine. We can push back. So if the outside needed to push back farther, the right side would need to push back. Notice the middle's off a little bit. They would just only have to move over a little bit, and they're in a great spot to hit. Setter's ready to go in the house. Again, this is where it's important that we get our passes nice and high so that everybody has time to move. So on the serve, again, I'm just going to have them serve to the six. Setter on this one particular one, set to the outside. Okay, so notice that the outside is actually playing right side right now, um, and they're actually in the spot. So in this particular rotation, because of the setter actually not being a right side, not coming off the back, we don't traditionally have an outside until the outside moves over. So this one everybody needs to be aware. DS can actually kind of position themselves close to the 10 foot. So if the setter has an option, they could set the DS, especially if it's one of our outside hitters that can bang the ball behind the 10 foot line so they can hit. With this, our best options are outside the right side, which is technically right now the outside hitter, or the middle. Once the ball goes over, everybody moves in their place. Outside actually moves over into the outside position. So I should then have the setter, the middle, and the outside all at the net defensively in the right areas. And then you would in the back row, I have the right side or traditionally DS, the libero, and the DS playing back row defense. So now we're going to go to rotation 5. Notice that we moved over one more again. So now the setter is actually positioned in the middle. We got the right side in the middle. And notice how there's no crossover. The libero middle, diagonally or right where the middle position is, or the DS outside hitter are actually across. See, so everybody's in the right spot. This is where players need to start checking themselves. The outside, again, it was a DS and they moved to the front. So now they're in the outside hitter role. And then the outside hitter that was playing off the front moved back and they become a DS. It still could be somebody that's playing all around and we just call them the outside, but when they're in the back, they're kind of the DS in the DS position. So with this again, seams, outside's kind of pushes back a little bit, but they're in a great spot just because they're already in the outside position. The middle will need to move over a little bit once the ball is served. They need to position themselves behind the 10 foot and become hitters. Right side, again, I'm just going to have the ball served to the right side just for the fact that it just normally the balls go to the six. Notice how the shift came over. The setter kind of put a nice high ball that flew past the middle to the outside to hit. Again, notice how we do not have a right side with the setter coming out the front. But there are options saying, let's say we work out a play, we know it's coming to France, where if the libero makes first contact, maybe somebody sets the setter, or if right side made contact, the libero can take second ball and set the setter. There are options. We just need to worry about those after we kind of get a little bit more simplified on what we're doing. All right, so now we're going to go into our last serve receive. Notice it's just one more last rotation. Setters where they need to be out. Outside is right now positioned in the middle, and the middle is in the outside position currently until we stack and shift on the things. So this is a pretty simple one. The rotation 6 is the setters where they need to be at. The only switch would need to be the outside hitter in the middle once the ball is in play. And then the libero and DS would shift over, and the right side would shift over to the right back once the ball is contact. Play ball first, switch as we're going along if you're not in the play, but know what the play is. So in this one, ball served, they would go to the DS. Notice how the middle and the outside switched. This one between middle hit on this particular one. And now everybody's in their defensive play with the exception of the setter, middle, and outside hitter just needs to be up at the front of the net playing while that ball's on the other side. This is the area that they need to start being aware of is when they're at defense, they're at the net. Offense hitters are behind the 10-foot line. Back row's playing defense, trying to get the ball up to the setter Once the setter knows they're not in the play and don't need to play defense, they move up to their house into the 2 zone to be able to make a play. All right, so rotations for serve in my mind are kind of simple. Um, Everybody can kind of, as long as you're not crossing over certain players, we're fine. So see how the setter is serving first. They can cross over anybody they want in the back row serving. Does that they kind of whoever's serving is out of play on actually where they have to stand. So if they wanted to serve from the 5, nobody has to adjust. Where it matters is the middle stacks off the front. The right side or setter always stacks in the middle. They shoot through the middle of the stack, and the outside hitter is always the one that's closest to the 10-foot line. It should always stack at that. They should stack kind of tight, making sure they don't cross over. See in my formula here, they're not really fully crossing over. They're just right there. And as soon as the ball's served, everybody goes where they need to be at. Being aware that you're making this transition, but you got to pay attention to the ball being served because sometimes players hit it and it flies right back. So in this, we saw how the ball was served and it just went over and everybody's now in the right spots. And now they're at the net defensive because right now we're playing defense. Okay, so now we rotated. The outside hitter went to the back. It could be the DS coming in or the outside hitter serving. Setters are where they need to be at. Liberos where they need to be at. Right side stacks off the middle. The outside hitter is kind of where they need to be at, but we want the 3 of them up at the nets, hands up. Technically, you're not supposed to block the views, but it never gets called, so everybody's arms up. Everybody always stacks off the middle, so the right side is going to stack off the middle. As soon as the ball is served, shift, everybody's ready for defense. Rotation 3, so now the middle went back, so this would either be the libero or the middle serving. The right side is kind of where they need to be at. Outside hitter needs to cross over the middle once the ball served, so they would stack behind the middle. DS and setter are now not in the areas where they need to be, but they cannot cross over. So once the ball is served, you can see everybody crossed over, and then now everybody's ready for defense. So rotation 4, same thing. DS is where they need to be at. Libero is where they need to be at. Setter is now off the front. Right side is off the back. With serve, rotations 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5, and 6 are just basically the same as rotation 1, 2, and 3, with just different people playing up front. So now the setter is kind of where the right side was on rotation 1. They'll stack in the middle front, outside closest to the 10-foot line. Ball serve, everybody's ready for defense. Okay, we're at rotation 5. The DS, or if it's an outside getting pushed back, because we had the DS move up to the front, comes an outside hitter, kind of where they need to be at. And again, the setter just stacks the middle without crossing them up. Remember that you just can't cross them over until the ball is contacted by the server. Ball served, and then notice how everybody's at the right location for defense. And the last rotation, so with this one, rotation 6, most likely we'd have our middle serve on this one. If the libero has not served yet, like in this particular slide, we have them serve in rotation 3. So the libero cannot serve from the middle now. Let's say the libero did not, then it gives us an option to have the libero serve wherever we want them to serve. But once they serve, they're locked into that particular rotation. So in this one, we'd have the middle serve, and once the middle serves and loses, and, hopefully gets a bunch of points, but once they lose serve, then we would send in the libero. So for this one, notice how the middle is actually going to play in the libero spot, so they're going to be middle back. So middles, pay attention to this because it's a little different what we've been running. You guys will actually move to the middle, right to the right side, DS to the left back. This actually is our last rotation that I'll demonstrate on. I do plan on making some slides with defensive because I see that the visual might help you guys a little bit. But realize, pay attention to this. Know your positions. For players that are subbing in, know the positions you're covering and know where you need to be at. It is important that you guys pay attention to where you should be starting, where you should be stacking. so that you're in the right spot to start. Because if the refs are paying attention and you're not where you're supposed to be, or you're moving early, they can call us out of rotation, and we could have lost a great point. Maybe we got a point on the serve. So be very, very cognizant of where you're supposed to be at all times. Understand once that ball is in play where you need to be at, and then you guys just play the game. All right. Thanks. And if you guys have any questions moving forward, please ask.